Patient, Ben Solo, known by the alias Kylo Ren, presenting problem, has had a promising corporate career cut short due to constant mood swings and his inability to control his temper. He displays daddy issues with authority in general, but has managed to salvage his career and is now trying to conquer the galaxy. Diagnosis. Let's see. Hello, I'm Willarius the Therapist, founder and CEO of the fictional character Mental Health Co-op, where we diagnose and treat all of your favorite people from movies, TV shows, and video games. Hit the subscribe button to join our treatment team. As of the release of this video, Solo the Younger is set up to be the main antagonist of the conclusion of the new Star Wars trilogy. And so far in the series, he's done some pretty messed up things. And based on the ending of The Last Jedi, it seems like we can expect more evil from Ben. But why did all of this stuff have to go down like this for Leia's little boy? Well, it didn't. What I hope to show you is that not only was Ben Solo's fall from grace preventable, but several generations of dark side Force users could have been saved if the Jedi had just known more about psychology. But first, let's get to the analysis. It's clear almost immediately when Ben appears in Force Awakens that he's different than your typical psychopathic movie villain. What he has in common with typical baddies covered on this channel is that he's capable of extreme violence, violation of social norms, impulsive behavior, and apparent remorselessness. But wait, there's more. Ben Solo has a much more complex presentation than other typical movie antagonists. He's visibly conflicted when he first encounters Rey in The Force Awakens. He has more explosive emotional responses to frustration, he displays mood swings, and has very visible anxiety. These are the obvious differences, but there are some subtleties to his clinical presentation that are worth some attention. First is his attachment history. Attachment means the emotional bond that forms between two people, and more specifically, the value that an individual places on that bond. Looking at his dialogue, you can see that Ben places a very high value on his attachment to significant people in his life. In fact, it is his primary motivation as a character. From his perspective, Force Awakens is the story of Ben trying to find a suitable father figure.
I'm Han Solo. I feel like he's the father you never had. He would have disappointed you.
His entire Kylo Ren persona is meant to connect him with an idealized image of his grandfather. He is desperate to win the approval of Supreme Leader Snoke in Force Awakens. The end of The Last Jedi saw him attempt unsuccessfully to make a meaningful social connection with Rey via Force Facebook video chat.
Can you see my surroundings?
You're gonna pay for what you did.
I can't see yours.
He is starved for emotional connection and is very quick to attach himself emotionally to a new person, whom he hopes will meet his unmet emotional needs. But just as soon as that person lets Ben Solo down, he completely devalues the relationship and hates the person with a deep fury, as Snoke found out in the end of The Last Jedi. Another important quality that we see in Ben Solo is an inconsistent sense of self. In The Force Awakens, he's trying his best to imitate Anakin Skywalker, because underneath this imposing mask, he's unsure of himself or even his own allegiance. And throughout this movie and the sequel, he seems struggling to totally embrace who he is in the dark side, and conflicted about who and what he is.
I feel it again. The pull to the light.
Clinically, the combination of explosive temper, mood swings, unstable self-concept, and alternating between valuing and devaluing relationships are criteria that point to borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder is a somewhat notorious condition that's characterized by instability. Instability in mood, instability in relationships, and instability in self-concept. And with the personality qualities mentioned so far, Ben actually meets 6 diagnostic criteria. 5 are necessary for a diagnosis. I also think that with the additional context, we can interpret Ben Solo's fanatic attempts to win over the approval of Snoke to be frantic attempts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. So we can be pretty sure that Ben has borderline personality disorder. But so what? Well, you see, probably more important than the fact that Ben has borderline personality disorder is the analysis about how he got it. As with most personality disorders, BPD is a combination of nature and nurture. And when we look at the nature route, we see a great deal of evidence for a genetic disposition to BPD traits in Ben Solo's family tree. The personality traits of impulsivity, emotional intensity, and intense need for attachment are also seen in his grandfather Anakin Skywalker, who has also been shown to have a strong presentation of BPD symptoms. So much so that psychiatrist Eric Bui uses Anakin Skywalker as an illustration of the disorder for his students. Impulsivity and neuroticism definitely run in Ben's family. You see both impulsivity and neuroticism in Uncle Luke, and impulsivity in Ben's father, Han. So yeah, the Skywalker family tree has a lot of problems, but that alone did not doom Ben to his disorder. With BPD, just as, if not more important than the presence of these personality traits, is the presence of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. ACEs refer to any instance of traumatic event that occurred during the subject's childhood. ACEs play a pivotal role in the development of many mental health conditions, but it is especially significant for BPD. And, as you may have guessed, your uncle attempting to murder you in your sleep counts as an ACE. So we have enough evidence to account for Ben Solo's diagnosis, but there's something more subtle that is important to note. Remember what Luke said about why he tried to kill his nephew?
I saw darkness. I sensed it building in him.
So what does darkness rising in him mean psychologically? Well, all we have to do is look at the person who taught Luke what the dark side was.
But beware of the dark side. Anger, fear, aggression. The dark side of the Force are they.
This is the culture that formed Ben, his uncle Luke before him, and his grandfather Anakin before him. What you teach children about emotion is important, and in a universe where people can literally stop laser beams with the power of the feels, it's very, very important. And what the Jedi taught these children about emotions is very, very, very wrong. Luke saw anger, fear, and rage rising in a young Force prodigy, and thought that the presence of these emotions was threatening enough to warrant killing him. But I mean, you show me a young child who has anger, fear, and rage rising inside of them, and I will show you basically any child anywhere. They're not exactly known for being patient and serene.
Use your aggressive feelings, boy. Let the hate flow through you.
These emotions are just normal emotions that humans feel. There's nothing that is inherently good about these feelings and bad about these feelings. But what's even worse is that for a person with the traits associated with BPD, this type of misinformation about feelings is especially dangerous. Compared to the general population, people with BPD traits tend to be highly suggestible. Borderlines struggle with having a consistent answer to the question, I am blank. When people like Ben Solo or Anakin Skywalker are raised in a culture that vilifies these emotions that people with borderline traits feel intensely and often, then what that ends up doing is filling in the blank with, I am evil, which in turn makes the person all the more vulnerable to a predatory personality. Think about it, the Sith/First Order is kind of a perfect trap for a neglected Force user with borderline personality disorder. You want somebody to be there for you? I'll be there, just do what I say. You feel fear, anger, and rage? I can teach you to use that. Is your world a storm of emotional and conceptual chaos? We will give you control. The belief that some emotions are inherently evil is what psychologists call a cognitive distortion. And this one in particular is the exact opposite of what is healthy for someone with BPD. Dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT, was designed specifically to address borderline personality disorder. One of the key tenets of this therapy is something called radical acceptance. That is teaching the person to look at pleasant and unpleasant situations and emotions without judging them as good or bad, and instead asking what would be effective to do. Let's use this scene as an example. Radical acceptance would look like, I notice here that you're very angry, frustrated, and embarrassed. You're feeling an impulse to lightsaber that tech stuff in front of you. Now, what are the likely consequences of this? Snoke will probably be upset with you since that's probably very expensive. So instead of expressing anger, frustration, and embarrassment like this, why don't you, I don't know, do a bunch of push-ups? Good job! Studies have shown that a combination of long-term therapy and social support can help people with BPD manage these dark side emotions and live positive and productive lives. There's no reason that people like Anakin and Ben have to be supervillains. Am I saying that Kylo is blameless? Absolutely not. He's done terrible things and will probably do more terrible things in this next movie. But what I am saying is that 9 movies worth of bad stuff could have been avoided if Yoda had just read a book. Do you agree with our diagnosis? Leave a comment saying what you think, or to suggest another character for us to analyze. Subscribe and hit the notification button to see our next diagnosis video, as we celebrate the coming of winter by analyzing the original special Snowflake. You can click here to see more of our character diagnosis series. And don't forget to like and share this video with other psychology enthusiasts as we expand our treatment team here at the Co-op. I'm Valerius the Therapist, thanks for watching.